When it comes to upper-class scandals in Britain, who better to start with than Margaret Campbell, sometimes known as the Dirty Duchess. Margaret was infamous among high society even before she married the Duke of Argyll, but after their incredibly messy divorce, she became one of the most notorious women in all of England. During their marriage and amid their troubles, Margaret and her husband were no stranger to keeping secrets from each other. As it turned out, she had a secret locked drawer in which she kept some very shocking contents. When her husband discovered it, he broke it open, and what he found scandalized him and the world. Margaret Campbell was born Ethel Margaret Wigham, and she was not born poor. She was the only daughter of Helen Hannay and George Hay Wigham, who was a successful businessman and head of the massive Celanese Corporation, a chemical manufacturer. Margaret would grow up in New York City and had her schooling from some of the most exclusive private institutions in the country, rubbing elbows with other affluent heirs and heiresses of the time. By the age of 15, it was undeniable that Margaret was very beautiful. Men showered her with attention, and she learned just how nice that felt. By the summer of 1928, while on holiday on the Isle of Wight, she met an older boy, the 18-year-old David Niven, who later became big in Hollywood. Their summer romance bore unintended consequences when, shortly afterward, she discovered she was pregnant. This was a big deal, as if what had occurred went public, she would be infamous among high society and would likely carry a damaged reputation forever. Margaret took action and told her parents exactly what had happened, as well as the scandalous results. Her parents were shocked, and her father in particular was fuming with rage. However, as soon as they simmered down, they had Margaret sent off to a London nursing home, where a very hush-hush operation was performed, terminating the situation. 2 years later, in 1930, at the age of 18, and more beautiful than ever, her parents presented her at court in London as a debutante, essentially presenting her to the upper crust of society as ready to mingle with men and get married. The presentation at court was a rite of passage for young women of the aristocracy and upper classes, and Margaret's debut was a great success. She was named Debutante of the Year and had her pick of suitors, many of whom were simply smitten by her. With so many options, she entertained a very many flirtations, with her actions providing steady gossip fuel. Margaret eventually became engaged to Charles Greville, the extremely wealthy Earl of Warwick, while at the same time accepting the proposal of another man, the publishing scion, Max Aitken. Juggling two engagements at the same time caused quite a stir, and was considered audacious even for a woman such as Margaret, illustrating the confidence that she held in herself, but also her recklessness, which would define her later years. Surprisingly, and rather scandalously, Margaret chose neither Charles nor Max, but went for another man entirely, the businessman and avid golfer Charles Sweeney. Sweeney, an American-born heir to a substantial fortune, was seen as a glamorous and modern choice for Margaret. After getting married in 1933, she settled down with her new husband and attempted to have children. Unlike her experiences as a teenager all those years back, this time she suffered a heartbreaking 8 miscarriages. Sadly, when she finally did become pregnant, she delivered a stillborn girl. Despite the hardships, she persevered, and she eventually gave birth to 2 children. However, her difficulties left lasting psychological scars. In 1943, while visiting her doctor in London, Margaret nearly lost her life when she fell 40 feet down an elevator shaft, miraculously surviving. Yet, from this point on, nothing would be the same again. Doctors surmised that she must have grabbed onto the elevator cable, slowing her fall before landing on her knees and bumping her head. But the lack of clear medical understanding at the time left Margaret to deal with the aftermath of her injury on her own. After recovering in the hospital for several days, She returned home to her family, yet she was not the same, with her behavior now more erratic and impulsive, and most alarmingly, with nymphomaniac tendencies. It's possible that her accident and altered personality lent stress to her marriage, as only 4 years later, she and her husband filed for divorce. Margaret herself blamed the split on Sweeney's controlling nature, saying, quote, "All Charlie wanted in a wife was a pretty, brainless doll." Now, finally free, Margaret dated around, enjoying herself with many esteemed men, such as a broken engagement with the Texan banker Joseph Thomas, as well as a dalliance with the curator for the Met, Theodore Rousseau. Margaret soon met Ian Duncan Campbell, a dashing Scottish peer known as the Duke of Argyll. Brusque and forbidding, he even lived in an ancient, crumbling abode, Inverary Castle. The castle, located in the Scottish Highlands, although it had been in Ian's family for generations, was in dire need of repair and would strain their marriage later on. But he also had many red flags, with his previous wives claiming that he had mistreated them during their marriage. His second wife, Louise, had cited his temper and financial irresponsibility in their divorce, and perhaps Margaret should have run away, but instead she fell head over heels for him. They were married in 1951, with Margaret becoming the Duchess of Argyle in the process. Things appeared nice on the surface. She was the beauty of yet another high society wedding. She now had a title and a powerful new husband, yet below, things were not nearly as rosy as it appeared. Her new husband used her as a financial means to restore his castle to former glory. To him, she was just a bank account, and a large one at that. The Duke pressured her to fund renovations, draining her personal fortune and creating tension in their relationship. It wasn't long before Margaret realized that she may have made a mistake in marrying the Duke of Argyll. She may have been one of the most beautiful women of her generation, but to him, she was just another wife to use, intimidate, and demean. To complicate circumstances, she was also having difficulty giving him a child. These fertility issues were already a source of pain from her first marriage, and it didn't help that the Duke reportedly blamed her for their childless union. Being rather devious herself, on one occasion, while feeling particularly insecure about her fertility issues, Margaret reportedly began taking aim at the Duke's sons from his previous marriage, even going so far as to forge letters that claimed the boys were illegitimate. Her plan failed, but it showcased her determination to safeguard her own power, and she wouldn't stop there. To circumvent her fertility issues, at one point, Margaret tried to purchase an entire baby boy. Her plan was to take the child in and somehow pass him off as her own, making him the legitimate heir of the Duke. Unsurprisingly, this also didn't work out. The plan's failure only deepened the Duke's mistrust, and he viewed her actions as manipulative and deceitful. Suspicious that his wife had always had a roaming eye, the Duke of Argyll set out to prove it, and committed a deep breach of trust in the process. Annoyed that Margaret was staying out late and getting more distant, he even had her car wiretapped so that he could know where she was at all times. By the 1950s, the couple's marriage was in troublesome straits. Tired of the games and dishonesty, what really drove him up the wall was the fact that Margaret had a secret locked drawer in their home, and his fantasies about its contents drove him mad. One day, while she was away in New York, his paranoia got the better of him, and he called up a locksmith, asking him to break it open. What he found inside was more than he could even imagine. Years earlier, Margaret's first husband, Charles Sweeney, claimed that her fall down the elevator shaft had altered her personality and turned her into a nymphomaniac. The contents of her locked drawer revealed the entire truth. In it, among other things, was a set of extremely risque Polaroid photographs. The photos within revealed her nymphomaniac tendencies, with her fully undressed in very intimate positions. Although her face was usually obscured, the Duke recognized her by one telltale sign: her favorite pearl necklace. But what bothered him most was not just his wife in the photos, but the other men in them, caught in acts of intimacy, men who were very much not her husband. Faced with the sudden torrent of evidence of his wife's infidelity, the Duke was filled with anger. He immediately took action by filing divorce proceedings. In his court papers, Argyle accused Margaret of sleeping with no fewer than 88 men over the course of their marriage. This staggering number, whether it was accurate or exaggerated, was a deliberate attempt to humiliate Margaret and justify the divorce. The Duke's legal team presented the Polaroids as evidence, shocking the court and ensuring the case would become a public sensation. Margaret responded coldly, alleging in a countersuit that the Duke had also been unfaithful, and not just with anyone, but with her own stepmother. Although she seemed poised to take her husband down with her, on the very day of her hearing about his infidelity, she couldn't find a witness and had to drop her case. Her stepmother vehemently denied the allegations, and Margaret's failure to produce evidence weakened her position, leaving her vulnerable to the Duke's accusations. This hurt her reputation greatly, and in addition, she had to pay her stepmother damages for her bold claims. The financial penalty was a further humiliation, as Margaret's resources were already strained by the Duke's demands and the costly divorce proceedings. As the Duke and Duchess of Argyle were preeminent members of society, any split between them was going to be a matter of public interest. Over the next 4 years that they were facing off against each other in court, the press speculated wildly on Margaret's behavior, even dubbing her the, quote, dirty Duchess. As Margaret's intimate photos were now in public, newspapers at the time got a full view of the single most infamous snap in her collection, one in which she was kneeling in front of a headless man. As his identity was a mystery, journalists tried to guess who the man might be. In their search, they dug up even more dirt on Margaret. One man the press alleged had been involved with Margaret was Duncan Sandys, the Minister of Defence for Britain, who would later go on to become Winston Churchill's son-in-law. Whether or not it was him in the photo, he was definitely involved in her affairs and offered his resignation when the scandal broke. Although speculation remains, historians now believe that man was almost certainly Hollywood actor Douglas Fairbanks Jr., a married man at the time. In the end, the divorce was granted for the couple by Judge Lord Wheatley, who presided over the case. He rather cruelly stated that Margaret was a, quote, completely promiscuous woman and wholly immoral. She was now a free woman, but her reputation was tarnished. The divorce was finalized in 1963 and left Margaret ostracized from many of her former social circles. Friends who had once fawned over her now distanced themselves, wary of being associated with her scandal. Yet Margaret refused to retreat entirely and maintained a presence in London's social scene. By the 1970s, and in need of cash, Margaret wrote a memoir titled Forget Not, but it was considered embarrassing and too full of name drops. Financially desperate, Margaret also attempted to cash in on her scandal by giving paid tours of her home at 48 Upper Grosvenor Street in London, the place where her ex-husband had first found the infamous photos. In her later years, friends claimed that Margaret became much less trusting, even to the point of only trusting her pets and not actual people. A maid of hers once said that she treated her dogs better than she did her staff. By the 1980s, her finances continued to dwindle, and her bank account struggled to match her extravagant tastes. She eventually moved out of her home to a hotel instead, and at the urging of her children and first husband, Charles Sweeney, to a meager apartment building. By the early 1990s, she was no longer able to take care of herself, and her children placed her into a nursing home. She passed away in 1993 after a bad fall in the nursing home bathroom. Although her name is synonymous with the idea of scandal, Margaret Campbell was also obsessed with class and the proper way to display herself in the world. Her life was as glamorous as it was controversial, but she undoubtedly brought her own flavor to high society in 20th century Britain. The Dirty Duchess moniker and the frenzy surrounding her divorce marked a turning point in British tabloid culture, and her case was one of the first to expose the private lives of the elite to mass scrutiny, paving the way for modern celebrity scandals. Though often remembered for the scandalous aspects of her life, Margaret was a fascinating woman whose existence, the good parts and the bad, left a legacy that secured her place as one of Britain's most memorable figures. If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say in who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.